I always thought that I had it all figured out. I was Henry Mills, the kind of guy who could do anything and everything that was expected of me. I had a solid career, a beautiful wife named Julia, and 2 kids that meant the world to me. Life was supposed to be simple: work hard, provide for your family, and do what any good man would do. But it wasn't until I got hurt on the job that everything changed. It was a typical Sunday afternoon when it happened. I had just finished a tough game, and we were heading back to the locker room when it occurred. I felt a sharp pain in my back, something that had never happened before. I tried to brush it off at first, thinking it was just a minor injury. But as the days went by, it became worse. Eventually, the doctors told me I would need to take time off from work. I was devastated. My identity, the very essence of who I was, had always been tied to my career. And now it was slipping away from me. I spent months in recovery, forced to stay at home. It was during those months that I began to notice things about my family and myself that I had missed in the rush of my previous life. My kids, my beautiful children, were growing up right before my eyes, and I wasn't there for it. I missed their first steps, their first words, and all the moments in between that I would never get back. I was so focused on the game, on proving myself to everyone else, that I lost sight of what truly mattered. I didn't know it at the time, but that injury was a turning point. I realized that I didn't need to keep pushing myself to the point of exhaustion for a career that no longer felt fulfilling. I needed to focus on my family, on my wife, and on what truly mattered in life. When I told Julia that I was retiring from my job, she was supportive at first. But it didn't take long for things to change. She had put her own dreams on hold for me. So when I told her I was stepping away from work, she wanted to go back to her career. I promised her that I would support her, just as she had supported me all those years. But the reality was, it wasn't as easy as we both thought it would be. Now, I spend my days at home, taking care of the kids, making sure they have everything they need, and trying to keep our house in order. Julia goes to work every day, and she's been doing an amazing job. But it's hard. Sometimes it feels like we're living in 2 separate worlds. She's out there working, and I'm stuck at home doing what people would call women's work. I've heard the jokes, the comments from the guys. They say I'm emasculated, that I'm less of a man for staying home. But they don't understand. They never will. The real test came one evening, when we were invited to a dinner party by our new neighbors, Rob and Valerie. They had just moved into the neighborhood, and they were eager to get to know us. The evening was meant to be lighthearted, a chance to bond over some food and drinks. But as soon as we walked in, I felt the tension. The guys, who I had known for years, were giving me sidelong glances. I could feel their judgment on me. "So, Henry, what do you do for a living?" Rob asked, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin on his face. "I stay at home with the kids," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a long pause before he laughed. Wait, a house husband? Can you imagine that? No way. You can't do that and not lose your man card." I felt my face flush, but I didn't let it show. "Actually, I'm perfectly happy doing it," I said, my voice a little firmer now. "Yeah, well, I think it's wonderful," said Valerie, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. "It's nice to see someone being so involved with their kids." "Wonderfully emasculating," Rob muttered under his breath, clearly still not getting it. The rest of the evening went downhill from there. Every time I spoke, there was a hint of mockery in the tone. I could feel Julia looking at me, her eyes filled with concern. I knew she hated seeing me like this, hated seeing how they treated me. But she didn't know what to say. After the dinner, we got in the car, and the silence between us was deafening. I wanted to talk about what happened, but I didn't know where to start. Finally, Julia broke the silence. "Do you feel okay about all of that?" she asked softly. I sighed. "Honestly, I don't know. It just feels like no matter what I do, they'll never respect me. They don't understand why I'm doing this." "Henry, you don't have to explain yourself to them," Julia said, reaching over to touch my hand. "What you're doing is brave. You're an amazing dad, and you're doing what's best for our family. That's all that matters." "But it's not just about being a dad, Julia. It's about how people see me. I don't want them to think I'm weak." "You're not weak, Henry," she replied firmly. "You're stronger than anyone I know." I smiled at her, feeling a wave of warmth wash over me. "Thank you. I just need to keep reminding myself of that." But as the days went on, the doubts continued to creep in. I began to wonder if I was really doing the right thing. Was I just hiding from the truth? Hiding from the pressure to live up to society's expectations of what a man should be? Was I truly happy? Or was I just too afraid to face the reality that my life had changed forever? The real breakthrough came one morning when I was sitting in the living room with the kids. We were playing a game together, laughing and having fun. For the first time in a long while, I realized that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My worth wasn't determined by my job or my income. It was about the love I gave to my family, the memories I created with them, and the joy we shared every day. I called Julia at work and told her I had made my decision. "I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore," I said. "I'm proud of what I'm doing, and I'm proud of us." "Henry, that's exactly what I needed to hear," she replied, her voice filled with relief. "I love you." And at that moment, I knew that no matter what anyone else thought, I had found my purpose. It wasn't in the applause of others. It wasn't in living up to their expectations. It was in the quiet moments at home, with my family, where I could truly be myself. As time passed, Henry continued to navigate the complexities of his new life. It wasn't just the awkward dinner parties or the constant questions from friends and neighbors that bothered him. It was the silent, subtle pressure that seemed to follow him every day. He wasn't just a stay-at-home dad. He was the stay-at-home dad. And that was a hard label to shake. One afternoon, while he was playing with the kids in the living room, the doorbell rang. He wiped his hands on his jeans before answering the door, expecting it to be the mailman or perhaps a package. But when he opened it, he was surprised to see Rob standing there holding a bottle of beer. "Hey, man, thought I'd drop by and see how you're doing," Rob said with a nervous chuckle. It was clear he wasn't quite sure how to approach Henry now. Henry stood there for a moment, unsure how to respond. He hadn't heard from Rob since the dinner, and the thought of inviting him in felt strange. But he didn't want to be rude either, so he stepped aside and let him in. "Thanks. I guess. Come on in," Henry said, trying to sound casual. The two sat down in the living room, and for a few moments, there was an uncomfortable silence between them. Rob shifted in his seat, clearly trying to find the right words. "You know," Rob started, "I've been thinking a lot about what I said the other night. I was kind of a jerk, and I just wanted to apologize." Henry raised an eyebrow. "You mean when you made fun of me for being a stay-at-home dad?" Rob nodded, looking embarrassed. "Yeah, that part. I don't know, man. I guess I never really thought about it that way. I mean, you really are doing something important for your family, and I think I was just so caught up in my own stuff that I couldn't see it." Henry felt a mix of emotions: surprise, relief, and a little bit of skepticism. It wasn't every day that someone like Rob admitted they were wrong. "I appreciate you saying that," Henry replied. "It means a lot. But it's been tough, you know? Not just from you, but from everyone. It feels like no one takes me seriously anymore. Like I'm not doing enough. Like I'm failing at something I didn't even sign up for. Rob shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I get it, man. Trust me. I had no idea it was this hard for you. And I guess I was too quick to judge. It's just that, well, I'm from the generation that thinks a man's worth is based on how much money he brings in or how much he can provide, you know? It's stupid, but it's just how we were raised. Henry nodded, a small, bittersweet smile forming on his face. Yeah, I get it. The whole man's role thing. I've been fighting that my whole life. But the thing is, I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I don't need to be the breadwinner to be a good husband or a good father. I just want to be present. I want to be here for my kids. And I want to show my wife that I'm not doing this to hold her back. I'm doing this because it's what I want to do. Rob took a long sip of his beer, looking thoughtful. I never saw it that way before. I guess it makes sense, but I don't know how I'd do it. I mean, I can't imagine giving up the job and letting my wife take on everything. That's the thing, Henry said, leaning back in his chair. It's not about giving up or letting anyone take on anything. It's about doing what's best for your family. For me, being at home with my kids, that's the best choice. And yeah, sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes I feel like I'm not enough, like I should be doing more. But then I think about the time I get to spend with them, and I know I'm making the right choice. There was a long silence between the two men. Rob looked at Henry with a new kind of respect, something that wasn't there before. I'm not saying I completely get it yet, Rob said finally, but I'm starting to. You know, I think you've got something I don't have. You've got balance. You've got what really matters. Henry smiled faintly. Thanks, Rob. I don't expect anyone to get it right away. But maybe, just maybe, this is the future. Maybe the whole man's role thing needs to change. And it's okay if I'm the one to start that change. The conversation shifted after that, and by the time Rob left, the air was lighter, and Henry felt a small sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to shift. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone in this as he thought. A few weeks later, Henry found himself in yet another awkward situation. Julia was at work, and the kids were at a playdate with their cousins. That left Henry to tackle a rather domestic challenge, a sudden leak in the kitchen sink. He pulled out the tools, figuring it wouldn't be too difficult. After all, he had fixed things around the house before. As he crouched under the sink, trying to figure out the source of the leak, he heard the doorbell ring. With one hand still on the pipe, he mumbled to himself, "Can't get a break, can I?" He shuffled to the door, wiping his hands on his pants, and opened it to find a delivery man standing there with a large box. "Delivery for Henry Mills?" the man asked, looking at him like he was a bit out of place in the doorway. "That's me," Henry said, taking the box. "Thanks." The delivery man left, and Henry closed the door, setting the box down on the kitchen table. As he opened it, he found a new set of tools, top-of-the-line plumbing tools. There was a note attached, written in Julia's neat handwriting. "Hey, love, thought you could use these for the sink, and for anything else around the house. You're doing an amazing job, and I'm so proud of you." Henry felt a surge of emotion. It wasn't just the tools or the note. It was the recognition. She saw him. She understood him. She valued what he was doing, even when no one else did. Later that evening, when Julia came home, Henry was sitting at the dinner table, his hands clean and the sink fully repaired. "Hey, guess what?" he said with a grin. "The sink's fixed." Julia raised an eyebrow. "Really? How?" Henry shrugged nonchalantly, then reached for the tools on the table. "I had a little help from you." Julia laughed, walking over and kissing him on the cheek. "I'm so proud of you." As they sat down for dinner, Henry realized that while he still faced challenges and judgment from others, the only opinion that truly mattered was the one from the people he loved. And that, he realized, was enough. As the days passed, Henry continued to embrace his role at home, growing more comfortable with the idea of being the one to stay behind while Julia went to work. He had come to terms with the judgments of others, learning that true happiness didn't lie in conforming to societal expectations, but in finding fulfillment within himself and his family. Every time he played with the kids, fixed something around the house, or even just had a quiet moment with Julia, he felt a sense of accomplishment that he never had during his hectic career. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Henry sat on the couch beside Julia, feeling a rare moment of contentment wash over him. She reached over, taking his hand in hers, and smiled at him. "You know," Julia said softly, "I've been thinking about how much you've grown. I don't think I ever fully understood what you were doing at first, but now I see it. You're doing the most important job of all, and you're doing it beautifully." Henry smiled, feeling a warm rush of love. "Thanks. I think I'm starting to understand it too." Julia leaned in to kiss him on the cheek, and for the first time in a long time, Henry didn't feel like he was missing out on anything. He realized that the work he was doing now, raising his kids, supporting Julia in her career, and keeping the home running smoothly, was his own form of success. It wasn't about the outside world's validation, but about creating a life that worked for his family. As the years went on, Henry grew into his role even more, no longer questioning his place in the world or comparing himself to the traditional ideas of masculinity. He had found his own version of success, one where he was there for the people he loved the most. It wasn't always easy, but the rewards, watching his children grow, supporting Julia in her career, and finding a deeper connection with his own family, made everything worth it. Through his journey, Henry learned that fulfillment doesn't come from meeting others' expectations. It's not about fitting into someone else's mold, but about finding your own path. Whether that path leads you to a career, a stay-at-home role, or anything in between, what matters most is that you find peace with the choices you make. No one else can define your worth, and no one else should. Now, think about your own life. Have you ever been judged for the decisions you've made, whether personal or professional? Have you found peace in your own choices? Or are you still striving for validation from others? The truth is, your happiness is yours to define. So, what do you think? Have you ever felt the weight of society's expectations bearing down on you? And how did you handle it? Or perhaps you're on a similar journey to Henry, trying to find your own balance between the world's demands and what truly makes you happy. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share your experiences with us in the comments or through your feedback. Let's talk about the choices we make, the paths we take, and the real success we find when we stop listening to the noise around us.